activist for the rights of trans and gender diverse persons globally. Originally from South Africa, Rikki formed the first trans-specific and trans-led organization in Zimbabwe in 2015, after being unlawfully arrested for using a female restroom at a local hotel. She then was instrumental in the formation of the Southern Africa Trans Forum, the strongest trans movement in Africa. Upon acquittal for her arrest in 2014, she took on the state of Zimbabwe with a civil suit. This act of bravery has proven to be risky to her life and has seen her fleeing from her home country of Zimbabwe and resettling in the United States. In November 2019, judgment was finally handed down in her civil suit against Zimbabwe, and she made history with a groundbreaking judgment that has positively changed the legal landscape for trans and gender diverse persons, not only in Zimbabwe, but further afield. I'm happy to introduce to you Rikki Nathanson.
Thank you, Sterling. Thank you very much. Thank you for welcoming me here this afternoon. It's a great pleasure and a great honor. And as has been said by Sterling earlier on, I'll begin by introducing myself. Again, I'm Rikki Nathanson, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. It may sound extremely mundane for me to be saying what my pronouns are, but in many spaces in which gender diverse people, LGBTQ people exist, it's very important for us to reiterate what our pronouns are, because many times we are misunderstood and we are not addressed correctly. As had been said by Sterling, I am here in the United States. I just recently was working with Casa Ruby, which is an organization in Washington, D.C., looking at addressing the homelessness problem that we face in the region, the DMV region, facing the LGBTQ youth. That job has come to an end because Casa Ruby is going through some issues at the moment. It has been defunded. The program that I was running, I was the Director of Housing Programs, but the funding from the DC government was pulled a month ago. So for the last month, I'm between jobs. Leading up to my moving to the United States, I'll go a bit into depth around my story, because the introduction that Sterling gave doesn't really do it justice. So I was born in Zimbabwe of South African and Zambian parents, so my citizenry is Zimbabwean. I grew up in Zimbabwe. I was educated in Zimbabwe, and up until 2014, I had a relatively quiet, stress-free life. I came from a very stable background. Both my parents were in the teaching profession. But in 2014, I went to a hotel, a local hotel in the city of Bulawayo, in which I live, actually went to meet a client of mine, because I then ran my own financial consulting business, modeling agency, and events company back in Zimbabwe. When I got to the hotel, I saw a young man that I had met about a couple of months earlier, because I used to frequent this hotel quite often after work. It was a very popular after work spot, sort of like a happy hour sort of scenario. And he was pleasant. I'd met him about 3 or so months earlier, and he had told me then that he was a member of the local university student council. And when the few times that we had spoken, he'd mentioned that he had wanted me to help him do a fundraising event to raise funds for the university. And so I knew this young man, from saying hello to him several times over the last 3 or so months. But that particular evening, he was extremely drunk. and he was sitting with another young man, and he called me over to talk to them, and he said to me, oh, we need to speak to you. So I said, what's it about? He said, oh no, this friend, the friend of his, didn't like what I was doing. I said, so what is it that I'm doing that you do not like? So he says, oh no, you know what you're doing. So I said, no, I do not know what I'm doing. That's offensive to you. So it was back and forth for a while, and they told me to go and sit down. I went to go and sit down. Then I heard this young man on the phone talking to somebody, but I didn't really pay attention to what he was saying. And within 45 minutes, 6 riot police arrived. And so back home in Zimbabwe, the riot police they're really intimidating, really scary. So there's 6, there were 4 males and 2 female police officers arrived in full riot gear, complete with visors. They were carrying rifles. And they went over to this young man. He pointed them to me, and they came to me and they said, oh, you're under arrest. I said, well, what's it about? They said, oh, well, just follow us. They bundled me into the back of a police van. I was taken to the police station, the local police station. And upon arrival, I was forced to strip naked in front of 5 male police officers at gunpoint. And to cut a long story short, I was in prison for 3 days and 2 nights. And within that time, I was vilified, I was harassed, I was verbally abused. And I was sent for 2 gender verification examinations at two local government hospitals. And both hospitals confirmed that I was indeed transgender. So that happened on the Thursday night. On the Saturday morning, I appeared in court, and that was a farce because the judge didn't know how to try my case. I was remanded until the following week, but upon remand, this young man was so angry that I was being let loose, and I wasn't going back to prison. He was so angry, he actually threatened to kill me. So with that, I was whisked off to a safe house for the 10 days before my next court appearance. At that court appearance, again, it was the judge felt they couldn't try me, and then I was remanded again for another week. I went back to court, and after it was like a whole morning court case, I was acquitted, because the charge that had been leveled against me, which was criminal nuisance for using a restroom, was not on the statute books, so they couldn't charge me. So I was acquitted. I waited a couple of months, and then I decided that I needed to take action because I was traumatized, having been in prison for the 3 days and 2 nights, and having been stripped naked at gunpoint in front of 5 police officers. I decided to take a stand, and I filed a civil lawsuit against the police of the country and the Minister of Home Affairs, who's the minister in charge of the police force. So that happened in the August of 2014. Everything went quiet for some years, and then in 2017 we finally went to court, and I went to the Supreme Court of Zimbabwe, which is the highest court in the land, because I had filed a constitutional violation charge against the state of Zimbabwe. That court case, which my lawyer had told me should only last an hour, dragged on for 3 days. It was also very harrowing. And the judge at the end of the trial said to me that he anticipated it wouldn't take longer than a week or so for judgment to be handed down. And then he went quiet, 2017, 2018. So by 2018, in the August, we had rumors that the judge would be handing down judgment pretty soon. And this was around about in July. In the August, I realized that my phone was tapped, and a strange unmarked car was following me around, and I was really feeling intimidated. And then in the October, So at that stage, I was heading the Southern Africa Trans Forum, so I was hardly ever in the country. I'd spend a lot of my time in the region of Southern Africa, and I'd come across to the United States quite a few times, to Europe, to Geneva, because I was the spokesperson. I gave presentations at the United Nations in both Geneva and New York. And I gave presentations to the World Health Organization in Argentina. So I really was a global trans rights activist. I was home in the October, and when I was home for the 2 weeks. And in the 2 weeks that I was home, they broke into my home twice. The first time I wasn't home, they completely trashed my house, didn't take anything. The second time I was there, and they broke into my home. There were 4 men that broke into my home. They attacked me. They beat me with baton sticks, and it was horrific. But luckily for me, thankfully for me, they didn't, that it didn't get any worse. But that in itself was harrowing, to say the least. Fortunately, I had to travel again straight after, and then I came back to the United States. I went back to South Africa, and then I came back to the United States at the end of November to do some work at the United Nations in New York. And while I was here, the first week of December, I got word from back home that they'd broken back into my home. They'd gone to my organization to look for me. They had spoken to my staff to ask when I was coming back home. They wanted my itinerary because they said that I was required for questioning by the president's office. And if anybody knows anything from countries like Zimbabwe, third world countries that live under forms of socialism, communism, that sort of political system, if one is looked for, if one is required for questioning by the Secret Service or by members of the President's Guard, and you want it for questioning in the president's office, then it really doesn't bode well for you. And at that time, when I was here, at least 5 activists in Zimbabwe had disappeared with no trace after them having been picked up by members of the Secret Service. So I was too afraid to go back home. And thankfully, I have friends, very good friends that are here in Rockville. I spoke to them, and they said, no, you just come along to us. And I came to them. And I've been here ever since. I was fortunate to get a job straight. I filed for asylum straight after Christmas, and it was granted within 5 weeks of me applying. So I was granted asylum in the February of 2019, and I've been living in this area since then, working in Washington, D.C. And that's my story.
Wow, you've been through a lot. Sometimes we pay a high price for our leadership role and being front and center on major issues. So I'm going to open it to questions and answers.
Hi, Rikki. I'm from Zimbabwe, and I moved here back to the US in 2019. I think more or less a couple of months after you. And I've been in DC for a year now. When I was growing up, my whole family, my mother had hair salons. So we had, the hairdressers, Twiggy, Floyd. This
I know them.
Yes, I know. Yeah. So I'm Sue Peter's daughter.
Oh, yes, right. So good to meet you.
Good to meet you. So we're
Small
allies.
world.
It is
Yes,
a
indeed.
world.
Yeah, so I've always been an ally of the gay and trans and lesbian community, and we'll go to all the gals parties. They had the best parties in Harare. Then I think Robert Mugabe, over his last years, as he became more ostracized by the world for being a dictator, he was in power for 37 years, and I think the last few years he became more and more toxic. So he decided to double down on his most controversial policies, one of which was his attitude towards the gay and trans community. And I'm just trying to figure out, when you won your court case, I know the coup, Mugabe was taken out in November 2017.
Yes.
So when did the Supreme Court, when did you win your case? Was he already out of power? And what were the timelines around that?
Yeah, I see he was. So I went to, so my court case was heard in July of 2017. So he had just been ousted from power then. And judgment was only handed down in 2019, more than 2 years later. And I was already living in the United States then. But just to contextualize it, what happened was the judge that heard my case at the time of my case he'd been earmarked for a promotion to the SADC regional court. I forget what the name is, but it's like the Supreme Court of the region of Southern Africa. And he was very well respected. He was very, and he was so fair, and he was amazing. Even at the actual, at my actual trial, it was evident that he was on my side, and put it that way. And after I left Zimbabwe, so I started living here from the December of 2018. So it'll be 3 years now in about a couple of weeks' time. He moved to Harare, and he was meant to have moved to work in, I think it was Johannesburg or somewhere. But then just before that happened, I believe that what happened was they conspired against him, and this was just after he so in the November 2019 judgment was handed down. In the December, there was all these rumors and all these stories about him in the press, the national press, that he had done, I don't know what they said he'd done, and he was fired by the government. And I'm not sure whether that my case had anything to do with it, because he actually stood, he actually went against he went against the government of Zimbabwe. But I think it had a lot to do with it, because they said he was controversial, and a lot of his judgments they weren't happy with. But with that said, I mean, it's really sad for him, but this has opened up so many doors for so many people internationally. I've been asked my case has been cited in India, and I've done lots of talks like these across the world. And it really, I mean, it's really sad for him, but I think for humanity, what he did was unprecedented.
Thank you, Rikki, for sharing your story. Thank you for your courage and for showing us all the challenges and difficulties that people face very often before they come to this country. So my question to you was, based on your experience, what do you see as the future of the movement, both in the United States and in other countries?
Thank you. That's a great question, and that's a question that we've been having among ourselves back and forth for many years now. With particular interest and worry is what's going on in the United States at the moment, as regards trans rights. In our own backyard, look at what's happening in Loudoun County with the discussion around transgender rights and bathroom laws and that sort of thing. So it really is a worry. I would say, as much setbacks as we seem to be facing from time to time, we are experiencing many gains around the world. And I'm speaking for all the trans diverse people. Just recently, especially looking in Asia, there have been very progressive laws passed in Nepal and in India. There are very progressive laws that were passed in South America, in Argentina, for example, and Venezuela around trans rights. In the United States, even as much as the conversations going on in Loudoun County about the bathrooms, just yesterday, the US has issued their very first passport that is gender neutral passport. So I mean, there are a lot of gains. It's a lot of work to be done. It's a lot of advocacy. And what actually harms all the work that we do is like one bad story goes and disrupts and dismantles everything. Like we have the story in Loudoun County, for example, of the young person that has been accused of sexually assaulting young girls in the bathroom whilst wearing a skirt. Now, it's very important, and I'm not sure, I don't have the answer for this, but it's really important that, and it's hard, I don't know how to frame this, but what that one person has done has the potential of disrupting an entire 100 years work done by trans diverse people in gaining recognition, in gaining respect, and in gaining back our rights as human beings, our civil rights, to claim our individuality and our sovereignty. Because what's happened with this one person is they are now, everyone's painted with the same brush. All the trans diverse people are painted with the same brush of one person that I don't even think can be said to be genuinely trans diverse or gender non-conforming or whatever pronoun they wanted to use, which is why it was so important for me to mention my pronouns before. I would say, you know, and this is a conversation that we're having among ourselves as the leaders of the movement globally, is how do you police young youth? How do you, we don't know yet. We don't know how we can stop what happened in Loudoun County from happening for people who are really underage. So by underage, I mean those that are below the ages of 18. But if we had to stipulate an age limit for one to self-identify, or for one to say that this is who I am, then it goes and it nullifies the discussions we've been having around where you're seeing kids as young as 7, 8, and 9 self-identifying as being trans diverse, and their parents are allowing them to do it, and then the law is saying allow them to do it, and then something happens like the 14-year-old child. So it's a great question you asked me, but it's really difficult. My advice as somebody who's lived a long life, and I've overcome a lot, and I've succeeded in many fields, is for my advice to the outside world is to accept people as who they say they are before they judge them, but to do so a little cautiously. I'm a firm believer in instinct. I'm speaking for myself. I have a very strong instinct, so I tend to be able to feel or to judge a person by how I feel about them. But it really is difficult. It really is difficult, and there is no answer to say this one size fits all. Each case needs to be taken on its own individuality before we can say that this is what this decision is and this is how it should be done.
Rikki, I had 2 quick questions. One, can you share some insights into what life is like in America for you in terms of daily challenges, fears, and anxieties? And also tell us maybe a little bit about the challenge of minimizing your sexuality in a professional workplace arena.
I think I'll combine the answer to both. I'll give one answer for both because they interlink. So what really struck me when I came to the United States, I've been living here for 3 years now, is the racial inequality. I actually did not realize that the inequality among the races was so prominent as it is in the United States. Coming from a country that was colonized that freed itself from colonialism 37 years ago, it really has struck me how divided the races are in the United States, and it's evident and it's prominent. And the reason I say that is because I worked for Casa Ruby, which was the only LGBTQ organization run by trans women of color. So myself and my previous colleagues, there were 11 of us that we made up the management team of Casa Ruby. We had programs, we had five, six, 7 programs across DC, and we had affiliation with other programs in Baltimore and a far field as Las Vegas and on the West Coast. And the reason why Casa Ruby was formed was because by being people of color, Ruby Corrado and other trans women before me that I'd met didn't have access to services by virtue of their race. And that was compounded by the fact that they were transgender. So even among the LGBTQ community itself, we have a hierarchy of power. And you'd find a trans woman, particularly of color, is at the bottom rung of she's at the lowest rung of the ladder of the hierarchy. So if it's all intersectional. So if you look at the fact that you are trans and you are a person of color and you're not white, then the odds are totally against you. So I'd say yes. I have not personally experienced any forms of racism, but I've certainly seen it and I've witnessed it.
Rikki, I wanted to know what or who will replace Casa Ruby? How is it going to, continue on to support the people that need it the most?
Yeah, so that's really difficult. So I know what has happened is with the closure of the Casa Ruby Low Barrier Shelter, which was the biggest program that I ran, we housed on any night we could house 50 people, and that program was shut down. With the closing of that, the Covenant House have opened up a similar program. So I think the government has diverted the funding from Casa Ruby to Covenant House. So the young people in need they still have shelter. The worry is the location of this new location. It's in the southeast DC, and it's in a part of DC that is known to be crime-ridden, shootings, and many of the clients that we had at Casa Ruby didn't want to go to Southeast because they had experienced violence themselves. They'd been shot at, they'd been raped, they'd really been through a lot. But that's what's happened that's what's going to happen to the youth. And many of the youth that we had at Casa Ruby have since moved to Covenant House. Yeah, it really is sad, but politics being what they are, and there are many stories. There've been stories in the press about why it happened. I cannot comment on them at the moment, but it really is. Yeah, it's sad. I've put my email address in the chat.
Oh, okay, and as Sterling well knows, we have a tradition of honoring each speaker with the planting of a tree around the tidal basin or on the National Mall in partnership with the National Park Service.
Thank you so much for the honor.
Sure. And normally I would be handing you a tree certificate symbolizing our commitment to do that. But we will put that in the mail to you as soon as possible. But that's our tradition. And again, thank you very much for speaking to us today.